The sound of a spoon gently clinking against porcelain broke through the steady hum of the diner. It was a warm afternoon in Fairview, one of those small towns where everyone seemed to know each other, or at least thought they did. Nancy, dressed in her light blue uniform and crisp apron, moved from table to table with the ease of someone who had learned to smile even when her heart was heavy. When she noticed the little girl sitting alone in a wheelchair, quietly staring at her untouched food, something inside her paused. Without hesitation, she knelt beside the child and smiled gently. "Would you like some help, sweetheart?" The girl, whose name she would soon learn was Anna, gave a tiny nod, her brown eyes avoiding direct contact. There was a soft, guarded sadness in her gaze. Nancy pulled up a chair, sat next to her, and began feeding her slowly, as if this moment mattered more than any pending order or expected tip. With every spoonful, Anna seemed to ease up, little by little, until a faint smile curled at the corner of her mouth. For Nancy, that smile was enough. She had no idea that someone else in the diner was watching her every move. Henry Whitmore stood by the counter in a tailored suit, his eyes locked on the scene unfolding before him. Owner of one of the largest civil engineering firms in the state, he was known for being ruthless in business and reserved in his personal life. No one at the diner knew that the little girl in the wheelchair was his daughter. Since the accident that left Anna unable to walk, Henry had become trapped in a storm of guilt and emotional distance. Watching a complete stranger treat his daughter with such tenderness stirred something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Nancy didn't notice the stares. She was completely absorbed in that moment, helping Anna sip her juice, wiping the corners of her mouth with a napkin, asking if she liked the food. Everything about it was natural, almost maternal. She wasn't acting out of pity, but out of empathy. That little girl could have been her sister, her daughter, or even herself in another life, another time. When Anna finally let out a soft, genuine laugh, a quiet hush seemed to spread across the diner. At that exact moment, Henry stepped forward, hesitating for just a second before walking toward the table. He could feel something shifting. Nancy looked up, unaware that the man standing in front of her wasn't just another customer. He was someone with the power to completely change her life. And he had already begun to do just that. Nancy stood frozen for a moment, the spoon still in her hand, hovering above Anna's plate. Henry's presence carried weight, not just from his tailored suit or commanding posture, but from the quiet intensity in his eyes. He looked directly at her, and for a second she felt completely seen. Not as a waitress, not as a background figure in someone else's life, but as a person. "Thank you," he said, his voice low and sincere. "Most people wouldn't have bothered." Nancy blinked, unsure how to respond. She gave a small, polite smile, unsure why her heart was suddenly pounding in her chest. Henry shifted his gaze to Anna, who was now watching him with cautious eyes. "Did you have a good lunch, sweetheart?" he asked. Anna nodded slowly, then turned her eyes back to Nancy. It was subtle, but clear. She trusted this woman more than she trusted her own father in that moment. Nancy caught the glance, and something inside her tightened. She recognized that look. She'd given that same look to strangers when she was young, looking for safety where it wasn't always promised. Her voice came out softer than before. "She did really well," she said, "and she has a beautiful smile." Henry didn't sit. He seemed restless, as if he wasn't sure what to do with the emotions rising behind his composed exterior. "She doesn't talk much anymore," he admitted. "Not since the accident." Nancy glanced back at Anna, whose small fingers now fidgeted with the hem of her dress. "It takes time," she said quietly. "Kids hold pain deeper than we think. They just don't always know how to let it out." Her words caught Henry off guard. He looked at her again, as if seeing someone who had walked roads he hadn't dared to imagine. "What's your name?" he asked. "Nancy," she replied, standing slowly. "I've got a few more tables to check on, but I'll be back." She smiled down at Anna and gave her shoulder a gentle squeeze before stepping away. Henry watched her walk across the room, something turning over in his chest, a feeling he didn't quite have words for. It wasn't just gratitude. It was curiosity. Maybe even guilt. How long had it been since someone spoke to him honestly? How long since someone looked at Anna and saw more than her wheelchair? Anna watched her go too, her expression softer now. Henry sat down in the chair Nancy had just left, unsure of what had just happened but knowing it mattered more than he could yet understand. The quiet between father and daughter lingered, not uncomfortable, but new, different. And from across the room, Nancy felt it too. Something had shifted. Something was beginning. Later that afternoon, the diner had begun to quiet down, the lunch rush giving way to empty coffee cups and soft jazz playing from the radio behind the counter. Nancy leaned on the register, scribbling notes on an order pad when she noticed Henry and Anna still sitting at the table. Most people didn't linger, not like this. Something kept them there, or maybe someone. With a breath she didn't realize she was holding, she grabbed 2 lemonades and made her way back to the table, unsure of what she was walking into, but certain it mattered. Anna smiled the moment Nancy approached. It wasn't wide or dramatic, but it was real. Nancy placed the drinks down and gave her a wink. "On the house," she said. Henry raised an eyebrow. "You really didn't have to." "I know," Nancy replied, folding her hands in front of her apron. "But it looked like you two could use a few more minutes." Her tone was gentle, but there was a current of understanding beneath it. The kind that came from living through storms and still choosing kindness. Henry seemed to recognize that, though he didn't say a word. "I used to come here with her mother," Henry finally said after a pause. Nancy's eyes flicked to Anna, then back to him. "Before," he hesitated, "everything changed." His voice was steady, but empty in a way that made Nancy's chest tighten. "She passed away last year. Car accident. I wasn't there." The weight in his words hung between them like fog. Nancy nodded slowly, her voice soft. "Sometimes, even when we're there, it still feels like we weren't." Her eyes glazed slightly as her own memories stirred, memories she rarely touched in daylight. Henry studied her, surprised by the sadness in her tone. "You lost someone too?" he asked carefully. Nancy didn't answer right away. "My younger brother," she said at last. "He was born with cerebral palsy. People didn't treat him like he mattered. I used to feed him the same way I fed Anna today. He passed when I was 16. She didn't flinch telling the story, but her fingers tugged slightly at her apron's hem. "It changes you," she said. "When you lose someone you tried so hard to protect." Henry simply nodded, the silence between them becoming heavier, but not cold. It was shared now. Anna, quietly sipping her lemonade, suddenly reached out and touched Nancy's hand. The small gesture sent a wave of emotion through her. Nancy met the girl's gaze and felt something blooming she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Not pity. Not routine. But purpose. Henry saw it too. And it scared him more than he expected, because for the first time in months, his daughter wasn't just existing. She was connecting. The next day, just after the lunch rush, Henry returned. This time, Anna was by his side from the start, holding his hand but walking slowly beside him in her wheelchair. Nancy spotted them through the window before they even came in. She quickly wiped her hands on her apron and straightened up. She wasn't sure why her stomach twisted the way it did. They weren't just customers anymore. Something had shifted, and it terrified her just a little. "Back for the lemonade?" she asked, smiling as she approached their booth. Anna grinned and nodded. Henry gave a short laugh. "She insisted. Said it wouldn't taste the same if we got it anywhere else." Nancy placed a hand over her heart in mock flattery. "Well, I'll do my best not to let her down." But as she turned toward the kitchen, she caught a glimpse of Henry, not just looking at her, but searching for something in her face, as if trying to understand her story, and maybe how it had quietly intertwined with his. While Anna colored on the kids' menu with crayons, Nancy returned and slid into the booth across from Henry. "You don't talk much," she said, not unkindly. He exhaled through his nose. "I talk all day. To lawyers, architects, clients. But when I get home—" His voice faltered, and he stared at the table for a moment. "It's like there's no one there to listen." Nancy nodded. "You ever talk to Anna?" He looked at her, defensive at first. Then, softer. "I try. I just never know what to say." Nancy's voice lowered. "You don't have to say the right thing. You just have to be real." The truth hit harder than he expected. He leaned back, running a hand over his jaw, his posture slouching for the first time since she'd met him. "I'm scared I already missed my chance," he said. "With her. With being the father she needs." Nancy didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked over at Anna, who was now focused, tongue slightly out in concentration as she drew a smiling sun. "If she didn't need you," Nancy said, "she wouldn't still be trying." Henry didn't speak again for several minutes. But something changed in his silence. Not defeat. Not shame. Something quieter. Reflection. Growth. Nancy didn't press further. Sometimes, letting someone sit in their silence was the kindest thing you could do. She got up, gave Anna a thumbs up on her drawing, and returned to the counter without another word. What she didn't say out loud was what echoed the loudest in Henry's mind. He hadn't missed his chance. Not yet. The following week brought a strange rhythm to the diner. Henry and Anna became regulars, showing up almost every other day. It was subtle, unspoken, but something like trust had begun to grow between them and Nancy. Still, Nancy kept her boundaries firm. She was warm, kind, attentive, but never let the conversations drift too far into her own life. She had built her world carefully, and she wasn't sure she wanted anyone stepping into it. But Henry, despite his quiet nature, was watching. He noticed how Nancy always clocked out exactly on time, how she never accepted help when cleaning up, how she smiled when spoken to but rarely talked about herself. And he couldn't help but wonder what she was running from, or what she was hiding. One afternoon, as Anna napped in the booth after lunch, he broke the routine. "Nancy," he said softly, "can I ask you something personal?" She hesitated, wiping down a table, then met his eyes with caution. "You can ask," she said. "Doesn't mean I'll answer." "I've been thinking," he began, choosing his words slowly. "I have to travel next week for work. Just 3 days. And I don't want to leave Anna with just a nurse again. She's been different since meeting you. Happier. Stronger." Nancy's hands froze mid-wipe. He continued. "Would you consider staying with her while I'm gone? I'd pay you, of course. Whatever rate you need. You're the only one she connects with." The question hung in the air like static. Nancy looked at Anna, peaceful, safe, and then back at Henry. Her first instinct was to say no. Absolutely not. She had never crossed that line before, blurring the boundary between customer and personal life. But something about Henry's voice, the vulnerability in it, made her pause. "Why me?" she asked genuinely. Henry exhaled. "Because you see her. You don't just feed her or help her, you see her. And I don't think I ever did until you showed me how." His honesty shook something loose inside Nancy. It scared her. She swallowed hard, feeling her past clawing at the edge of her throat. "I'll think about it," she said finally, her voice quieter than usual. "But I can't promise anything." Henry nodded, not pushing. "That's all I can ask." They exchanged a look, something raw and real. It was the first time Nancy realized how much power lived in the choices she was afraid to make. As she walked back behind the counter, she caught her reflection in the glass door. She looked the same, but something inside her was shifting. She wasn't sure if she was walking into something beautiful or into a storm. But for the first time, she was considering saying yes. Nancy barely slept that night. The offer echoed through her head like a song she couldn't turn off. Stay with Anna. In Henry's home. In his world. She thought about the girl's quiet laugh, the way she had clung to her hand. But she also thought about what it would mean to let someone in, really in. She'd spent years keeping her life compartmentalized for a reason. Letting that wall down now could unravel everything. The next morning, she gave her answer. Yes, she told Henry, standing beside his booth as Anna worked on another crayon masterpiece. I'll stay with her. But just for those 3 days. Henry looked up, surprise flashing across his usually reserved face. Thank you, he said, and meant it. You won't regret it. Nancy wasn't so sure. She could already feel the nerves rising in her stomach, tightening like a knot. But Anna's smile when she heard the news was worth it. For the first time in a long time, Nancy felt wanted. Henry gave her the address, a modest estate just outside town. Not extravagant, but far from simple. Nancy would arrive Monday morning. That weekend, she prepared as best she could, packed a small bag, left instructions for her shifts at the diner, told herself it was just temporary. But on Sunday night, as she locked up the restaurant, a man stepped out from the shadows near the alley. Her heart seized. Nancy, he said, voice low and rough, like gravel. Didn't think I'd find you here. She froze. The voice was unmistakable. Darren. A name she had buried years ago. Her ex, the man who'd made her teenage years a cycle of fear and silence. She hadn't seen him in almost a decade. What do you want? She asked, keeping her tone even. He stepped closer, smirking. I heard you're playing mommy to some rich man's kid now. That true? Her hands clenched into fists. You don't know anything about my life, she said. But inside, her panic was rising fast. Darren laughed, but there was venom behind it. People like you don't just walk away clean. You owe me, remember? The threat hung in the air, sour and familiar. Nancy stepped back, forcing herself to breathe. Stay away from me. I mean it. He said nothing more, just watched her walk away. But she could feel his eyes on her back the whole time. That night, as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Nancy knew something had changed. Not just in her heart, but in the world around her. Darren's return wasn't coincidence. And if he was back, her past might not stay buried for long. Nancy arrived at the Whitmore estate just after sunrise. The gates opened slowly as her car approached, revealing a winding driveway bordered by tall oaks and trimmed hedges. It was quiet, too quiet. She parked near the front steps and sat for a moment with her hands gripping the steering wheel. She had spent the entire night replaying Darren's voice in her head. His threats. His smirk. But now she was here, and she had made a promise. To Henry, to Anna, and maybe to herself. The front door opened before she could knock. Anna's nurse, an older woman named Miriam, smiled and waved her inside. Mr. Whitmore left for the airport an hour ago, she said warmly. Anna's in the playroom. She's been asking for you. That sentence, asking for you, hit Nancy in a place she hadn't touched in years. She nodded, forcing a smile, and followed Miriam through the long, sunlit hallway. The house smelled like lemon polish and fresh linen. Neat, expensive, but not cold. When Nancy stepped into the playroom, Anna lit up. You came, she said, wheeling toward her. Of course I did, Nancy replied, crouching down and opening her arms. Anna rolled in and hugged her without hesitation. That simple act undid something in Nancy. She felt her chest tighten, not with fear this time, but with something warmer, harder to define. "You ready for pancakes?" she asked. Anna nodded eagerly. They spent the morning cooking together in the spotless kitchen, flour dusting the countertops, laughter echoing off the marble. For a while, Nancy forgot what waited outside the estate gates. But when Anna went down for her nap, the weight of reality crept back in. Nancy stepped onto the back patio with a cup of tea and stared out over the manicured garden. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped. She let it ring. Then again. Buzzing. Again. She turned the phone off and set it on the table. Silence. But her hands trembled. Miriam joined her a few minutes later. "You okay, dear?" she asked kindly. Nancy hesitated. "Just tired," she lied. Miriam gave her a knowing look but didn't push. "Well, I'll be in the guest quarters if you need anything. You're doing a wonderful job with her." Nancy gave a grateful nod, her smile faint. But as Miriam walked away, Nancy's expression shifted. The calm was fragile. A mask. Later that evening, as Nancy read a bedtime story to Anna, a shadow passed across the window. It was brief, so brief she almost believed she imagined it. But deep down, she knew better. Her past had found her. The knock came just after midnight. Sharp. Deliberate. 3 slow taps that echoed through the stillness of the Whitmore home. Nancy sat up instantly in the guest room bed, her pulse racing. She hadn't told Henry about Darren. She thought maybe, just maybe, he'd disappear again, like he always did. But this time felt different. This time, he wasn't going to leave without something. She slipped out of bed quietly, grabbed her phone from the nightstand, and tiptoed down the hallway. Anna's door was closed. Nancy pressed her ear gently against it and heard nothing but soft breathing. Good. She was still asleep. She crept toward the back of the house where the patio door met the garden path. Another knock. This one faster. Her throat went dry. She peered through the thin curtain. A shadow stood beyond the glass, just out of reach of the motion light. But she didn't need to see his face. She felt it. Darren. She backed away slowly, heart pounding in her ears. Her instinct screamed, "Run. Call someone. Wake Miriam." But another voice, quieter, deeper, said, "Protect her." Nancy turned and went to the hallway closet, pulling out a heavy flashlight. She stepped into the kitchen, flipped the deadbolt on the patio door, and whispered to herself, "Not again." She opened it just a crack. "You need to leave," she said, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. Darren's smirk was there, even in the dark. "So this is how you're living now? Playing house with rich people," he said. "That little girl in there, she's not yours." Nancy tightened her grip on the flashlight. "And she's not yours to talk about. Walk away, Darren. I'm not scared of you anymore." But it was a lie. Part of her was scared. Not of what he might do to her, but what his presence might take away from Anna. "You think he'll want you when he finds out the truth?" Darren sneered. "You think he'll trust you with his kid when he knows what you've done?" His words hit like shrapnel, and Nancy faltered for a second. Her mind flashed to things she had buried, things no one else knew. But then, she saw Anna's face. Her smile. Her trust. That was real. That mattered more. "If you come back here again, I will call the police," Nancy said firmly. "You've had control over my life for long enough." She closed the door hard, locked it, and stood there, breathing fast but steady. Darren didn't knock again. But she knew it wasn't over. And when Henry returned tomorrow, she'd have to decide how much of her past he deserved to know. Henry returned late in the afternoon, his suitcase in one hand and a tired look in his eyes. He didn't expect to find the house so quiet. Nancy was in the kitchen, wiping down the counters with robotic focus. She didn't look up when he entered. Anna was napping upstairs, unaware of the storm building beneath the surface. "How was the trip?" she asked, her voice calm but distant. He paused, reading her posture, her tone. "Fine," he said. "But something happened here, didn't it?" Nancy finally met his eyes. There was no hiding the heaviness in her face. "Someone from my past showed up," she said. "Someone dangerous." Henry tensed. "Is Anna safe?" "Yes," she answered quickly. "I made sure of that." He took a step closer, his voice low. "Who was it?" Nancy hesitated. Every part of her wanted to bury the truth again, to let the moment pass. But she was tired of running. "His name is Darren. We were involved when I was a teenager. He was older, controlling, violent. I left him years ago, changed my name, started over." Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. "And now he's found me." Henry stood in stunned silence. The room seemed to shrink around them. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked. His tone wasn't angry, but hurt. "Because I didn't think I mattered enough to," Nancy replied. "Because I was afraid you'd see me the way everyone else did back then. Broken. Trouble." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "You've never been trouble to me, Nancy. Not once. But I wish you'd trusted me sooner." The truth settled between them like dust in sunlight. Painful, honest, beautiful, in a way. "What do you want me to do?" he asked. "Do you want to leave?" Nancy looked down at her hands. "That's the thing, I don't want to leave. But maybe I should." Henry walked closer, now only a foot away. "You didn't just take care of Anna while I was gone. You changed her. She talks more. She smiles. She draws. You gave her something I couldn't." He paused. "You gave me something too." Nancy blinked back, the emotion welling up. "I'm not perfect, Henry. My life has pieces that don't fit neatly together." "Neither does mine," he said. "But maybe they can fit together anyway." The words hung there, full of weight and promise. Before Nancy could respond, Anna's soft voice echoed down the stairs. "Nancy." She turned instinctively. "I'm here, sweetie." She started walking toward the sound, but paused at the doorway, turning back to Henry. "If we do this," she said quietly, "it has to be honest. No more hiding." Henry nodded once. No more hiding. But outside, unseen, Darren was watching from across the street, his eyes locked on the house. And he wasn't finished yet. The morning air was crisp when Nancy stepped outside, coffee in hand. The sky was a pale gray, the kind that held the promise of rain but hadn't decided yet. Inside, Anna laughed in the living room as she built a puzzle. For a moment, everything felt still. "Come." But Nancy's eyes scanned the quiet street. Darren hadn't come back. Not yet. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that the calm was borrowed, not earned. Henry joined her a few minutes later, still adjusting his shirt sleeves. "You didn't sleep much," he said gently. Nancy shook her head. "I kept thinking about him. About how fast it can all unravel." He stepped closer, his voice steady. "You're not alone anymore." That sentence, so simple and clear, was almost too much. She closed her eyes and nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. "He could come back," she whispered. "He will," Henry said. "But next time, we'll be ready. I have security cameras installed. Police notified. You don't have to run this time." The knock came just after noon. This time, Nancy didn't freeze. She stood tall, her hand resting gently on Anna's shoulder. Henry opened the door, Darren stood there with that same smug look, but now met by something unexpected: resistance. "This isn't your playground anymore," Henry said, stepping between Darren and the doorway. "You come near her again, and you'll answer to more than just me." Darren scoffed. "She's lying about me. She always lies." Nancy didn't flinch. "I told the truth," she said. "And I've already reported you. There's no hiding anymore." Darren looked past Henry, trying to lock eyes with Nancy one last time. But what he saw there wasn't fear. It was something stronger. He turned to leave, but Henry's voice stopped him. "You spent years trying to tear her down," he said. "But she's still standing. That says everything." Darren walked away without another word. And for the first time in years, Nancy felt the weight begin to lift from her shoulders. That night, after dinner and stories and the warmth of a quiet home, Nancy tucked Anna into bed. "Are you staying forever now?" Anna asked sleepily. Nancy hesitated, brushing a strand of hair from the girl's face. "I'm not going anywhere," she said. And she meant it. Downstairs, Henry waited with 2 cups of tea and something else in his eyes. Something soft. Something open. Nancy sat beside him, neither of them speaking at first. Then Henry reached for her hand. Not to save her. Not to fix her. But to begin with her. And for the first time, Nancy let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she was home.